Hey guys, this is a composed puzzle which won first prize in 1958. And if you're not familiar, they used to have these competitions where different composers would submit positions, and then the judges would look at all these different ones, and then they would decide which ones were the best and award the prizes accordingly. So getting first prize means there's something special about the position that the judges really liked. And in this one, there's a particular idea, a way that white can draw the game, which is fascinating. Okay, we're going to see that in just a second. So before I tell you too much, I'll just say white's pawn is going forward in this direction. It's white to play. And if you'd like to pause and try to figure out what the idea could be, feel free to do so. Although I will warn you, this is not an easy one to solve. So don't feel bad if you don't figure it out on the first try. All right, well, if you had a chance to look at that, let's talk about what's going on. So first of all, black has an extra rook. Okay, white has the pawn, black has the rook, and then we have the opposite colored bishops. Normally, the rook's going to beat the pawn every time. However, in this case, the pawn is very far advanced, and it only needs to go one space forward to become a queen once the king moves. So that's kind of the only thing that white has going for them. However, what makes this puzzle so fascinating is that not only does black have the rook, they also have a bishop on the light squares, which is ready to go and set up to stop the pawn, right? So if you imagine if white were to sort of waste a move here and play something like bishop g5, black would simply play bishop check, the king has to move, and then rook to c6. And notice how both of these pieces are now controlling that queening square. So if white ever decides to push this, black simply takes it and wins the game. Okay, so at this point, white can never push the pawn forward. It's only a matter of time before black's king, will eventually infiltrate and either checkmate white or force white to push the pawn or something like that. So it's a win for black. It's basically what you need to understand. If black can blockade the pawn successfully like this, okay? So with that in mind, the correct move here for white is the move king to d8. And this is the only a good move. Okay, if you play the move king to d7 instead, you walk into the check, and then just like I mentioned, we get the same exact position where you're losing. Okay, so you have to play king to d8 to not walk into the check. Now, if black plays bishop to e6, you can simply get the queen, and after this trade happens, this is actually a draw. So with correct play, you should be able to draw this with white. Okay, so king to d8, and black plays the move rook to d6 check. And the point is, black would love it if you walk back in front of the pawn. Now this would be very similar to what we saw before, bishop to e6 check. And if you tried king to b7, black would simply play rook to d4, threatening the bishop and also getting ready to come over here and stop your pawn. And so if you did get the queen, they would simply take the bishop, and you can see it's a win for black, right? So you can't go back in front of the pawn, which means after the check, you have to move over. So the question for you guys, which one is correct? Should you go to e8 or should you go to e7? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, the correct move is king to e7. And the reason is if you go to king to e8, then the bishop can come in, stopping you here, and the next move the rook's going to come over and we have the same exact problem, right? So this is kind of what you have to avoid. You can't allow black to get this setup with the rook and the bishop that I keep showing you, or it's always going to be a win for black. So because of that, you have to go to e7 to put the pressure on the rook. So if black tried to do that, you would simply take the rook. So here, black slides back over to c6, again, trying to get the same setup. And if you go back to d8, the bishop comes in, and we've seen this before, right? So what do you have to do? You have to go to d7 to put pressure on the rook. And now black plays the move rook to h6, attacking your bishop and also threatening to potentially use this bishop check to, do the same kind of thing that we've seen. So if you'd like to pause here, this is one of the moments in the study that's pretty mind-boggling, and try to figure out what is white's best move in this position. It's the only move, by the way, that draws the game. Only one move is correct. Well, if you had a chance to look at that, the move is the amazing bishop to f6. It's going from one square in pre where black can take you to another square in pre where black can also take you. And it's amazing because if black decides to take you, the game is immediately a draw. You simply get a queen. And yes, they can go check and skewer your queen, but you simply slide over and you hit the rook at the same time, so that when they take your queen, you take their rook. And remember, a king and a bishop against a lone king is always going to be a draw. You don't have enough pieces to checkmate. The best you could do would be some kind of a stalemate, and so the game is just a draw. So there's this really interesting idea of blocking the rook, right? Remember, you're blocking this check so that the bishop can't go there to prevent your pawn, but you don't even care that it's not defended because you have this idea of getting the queen and then sliding over. It's pretty amazing. Also, you're defending the h8 square, which is important because black would like to bring their rook down there to add another piece to control the square instead of the bishop, but they can't, right? So there's lots of things that this move does. Primarily, it's blocking off the rook. That's the main one. So what does black do? They play the move bishop to b1. And this is actually very, very clever. And before I tell you why or what's going on, if you'd like to pause, what move should you play here as white? And remember, there's only one correct move. All right, if you had a chance to look at that, the move is king to e6. And the reason is you have to control the square. You cannot allow that bishop to go there and get control of that diagonal, because if you do, like let's just say you make a random move of moving your bishop somewhere. The bishop's going to go to f5 check. You're going to have to move somewhere, and then the rook can come down, would be one thing, or it could even just come over here, and we get the same blockade kind of a deal. The king's going to run its way up, and you're going to lose. Okay, so you have to prevent that. Therefore, after bishop to b1, king to e6 does just that. And now black plays rook to h5, and essentially what black is saying is, I'm going to go there anyway, and now you can't stop me with your king because my rook is defending that square. So what do you need to play here as white? If you'd like to pause, go ahead and do that. Well, if you caught on to the drawing mechanism, you might have found this move, but it's bishop to g5. Again, we put it in pre. The rook can simply take us because we have to block off that rook to prevent this idea. And again, it's the same concept. If the rook takes, we simply get the queen. And even though there's the skewer, it doesn't matter because we slide over, and at the end of everything, we have the attack on the rook. So you guys see how that's the same idea, except it's moved up, right? Before it was the bishop was on f6, now the bishop's on g5, but it's the same idea. Fascinating stuff. And so black has one final trick here, rook to h8, stopping the pawn this way. What's the drawing move now for white? Well, if you looked at that, the move is bishop to d8. Again, it's the same idea, blocking the rook. And regardless of what black is going to do, you're always going to be blocking the rook off. So if they come back up here, you simply go back to g5. And there's nothing that black can do. They can't really make any progress because you can always block off the rook with your bishop, and you continually make that queening threat, and there's nothing black can do. So it's an amazing draw. This idea is really, really fascinating, that you can just throw the bishop in front of the rook, and that's how you draw the game. And that's the only way. There's no other moves. And so it's pretty mind-boggling, if you ask me. The Fen is going to be below if you'd like to check it out, play around with it yourself, and see if you can figure out anything else. But there, you will find that there's no other way to draw. So hope you guys enjoyed that one, and I will see you next time. As always, stay sharp, play smart, and take care.